a broad brush picture of where do we go from here.
Thank you, Mahathir. Good evening, everyone, and Putanda Waltuka and Wasaiki Mubarak to whoever celebrates Tamil New Year and Wasaiki. Thanks to the Monsoon Book Club, Malaysians Progressive in UK, and West London for organizing this forum to allow me to share with you my views with an excellent panel with Claire, Lena, Andrew, Dr. Said, and Wan Faisal. Now, let's get back to business. Is Malaysian G14, is democracy in danger? My answer is no. Because Malaysia is not a democracy. Malaysia is an electoral one-party state since 1969. Okay, so what I'm going to say for the next 10 or 12 minutes will be 3 points. One, to explain to you what I mean by electoral one-party state. Second, what about this project of two coalitions, a two-party system. Thirdly, GE14. Now, by electoral one-party states, I am talking about a system where you have elections, but it's essentially a one-party state, which means you have elections, but elections are not free and fair, which Andrew had touched on. You have opposition, but opposition may not stay free. Now, today is actually very important. I forgot to mention just now. It's not only just Tamil New Year and Wasaiki, it's also the 19th anniversaries of Anwar conviction. If you remember, that's a footnote, right? A good example to tell you what it means by opposition may not have a free ground. And thirdly, of course, that the boundary between state and parties is often blurred. So the difference, if you like, between Malaysia and, say, the People's Republic of China is that PRC is much more honest. They don't pretend to be a democracy. Now, how was this born? It was born after 1969. I'm going to challenge some of your fixed idea. 1969 is commonly known, the riot was commonly known as caused by, in today's word, a Chinese tsunami. That the Chinese abandoned the Alliance Party and therefore you have the riot. Now, that's not true. What happened in 1969 was a Malay Tsunami. There was 9 percentage points of votes in Malaya that shifted from the Alliance to PAS. The vote share between UMNO to PAS was reduced from 5-2 in 1964 to 3-2 in 1969. Basically, you have a two-party system for the Malays in place. 1969. Why do we have this idea that was a Chinese tsunami? Because the Chinese party, the Chinese-based opposition party, has increased their seats from 6 to 25. Their vote share in Malaya remained 26% in 1964 and 1969. There were change of party labels, but in general, that's something you can trust me with. What happened is that they basically sorted out multi-corners in 1964, and the system rewarded them. Now, while PAS gained 9 percentage points of votes, its seats only increased from 9 to 12. So, I want to put this into your mind. Part of the problems that we have in Malaysia is the electoral system, because it's very unpredictable, and you have a deeply divided society, not like in UK, that make it much more difficult to handle electoral volatility. So what happened now after 1969? The riot allowed UMNO to regain control, to rewrite the rules. So what UMNO did is build this one-party state. The one-party state stands on 2 feet. The first feet, of course, is Malay. The second feet is non-Malay. Now, this needs to be stressed because Malaysia was not an Uganda. Malaysia was not a Fiji. So you do not have outright persecutions of minorities and so on. It's a very, very sophisticated regime. What UMNO did to lock in the Malays' vote was actually to make the states explicitly pro-Malay, much more than what was agreed in 1957. The idea then is to basically counter back the 9% shift. But there was one more important thing. It meant to make the Malays stronger, but not safer. And why? Because this is very rational for the regime. You want the Malay to be remembered and say, if you vote, if we, UMNO loses power, if we, UMNO lose power, then you Malays will lose whatever thing you have. So, very ironically, the whole idea about this NEP, New Economic Policy, is to bring about national unity, but in practice, it's really to maintain the division. You see why? Because with such a shift towards the Malays' interests, of course, you alienate the non-Malays. So naturally, you have a strong resentment against NEP from the non-Malays. And that, every time the non-Malays call for abolitions of NEP, you're basically helping UMNO to say, now, you need to keep us in power. Now, in that context, all the corruption is just necessary evil. Okay, what about the second leg? How do you keep the Chinese voting for the ruling coalitions? Now, Chinese votes never get really like 70% for Alliance or Barisan Nasional. Never get that far. So the regime's expectation is very, very low. Okay? You get 30%, that was a low point up to before 2008. If you get somewhere 40%, that's doing very good, doing okay. You get to somewhere 50% above, that's fantastic. That's all. So you have a different system. But the idea here, what I want to stress is that the regime is so resilient because all it needs to survive from opposition onslaught is to make sure that you do not get both feet to move to the same directions. That's all what you need. Communal incoordinations. So at any point of time, if you can get one side holding back their support for opposition, that's all you need. Now, why the system is very, very sophisticated and resilient, because it builds in itself a very strong alarm system. The moment you say you're going to throw the system out, then the system would trigger at least the fear of the Malay side or the non-Malay side to keep it in power. So for the Malay, the fear is the fear of change. Because by changing the government, you're throwing out NEP, you may not have anything, everything back to square. For the non-Malays, the fear is really going back to the interpretation of May 13. The last time you tried to change the government, you had a riot. You sure you want to do it again? Okay. So this system survived the onslaught in 1990 because at the last minute, the Malays held back its support for the opposition. If you remember the Tunku law of Tunku Razali with a cross-light pattern and so on, that's the old story. Malay anxiety is nothing new. It just go back to sleep from time to time. 1999, it was the Chinese who held back the support. Dr. Mahathir believed that because of his the support for opposition, Dr. Mahathir believed because of his capital control, currency control policy. But on the ground, I will offer you another story. Wanita MCA sent their members to go to pasar and talk to other Chinese housewives and ask only one question. Have you stock-cut Maggi mee? You get what I mean? Yeah. There's no discussion about whether Mahathir or Anwar is better, what manifesto, no such thing. Have you stock-cut your Maggi mee? If you still don't get the message, why do we need to stock-cut the Maggi mee? Election is coming. No, you don't need to ask for my generation. Everyone knows what it means, is that you could have riot. You have to be prepared. Now, how do you buy an insurance so not to get riots? Keep the government in power. In short, people talk about, I'm not telling you that the fear is the entireties of Barisan Nasional statecraft. Certainly not the whole story. But this is the very, very important part of that story is with this fear that Barisan Nasional survived. So then the question is that how can this, if you talk about that Barisan Nasional being so powerful, using fear to keep itself its power, then what happened in 2008? How do we explain 2008? What happened in 2008 was an accident because the alarming mechanism failed. Why? You have to go back to 2004. Abdullah won a 91% majority. Would anyone at that time seriously thinking that you would against the government and the government collapse? No. Exactly because you're not alarmed, therefore you dare to vote against the government, and the outcome is that Barisan Nasional was hanging on 30 seats to stay in power. But what happened after that is more interesting. 2008 was an accident, but that accident destroyed the non-Malay leg for Barisan Nasional. You see, before up to 2008, it's rational for the Chinese to split, the non-Malays, especially for the Chinese, to split their votes, somewhere voting, give the bigger share to opposition. We are not happy, but you always retain a substantial support for the Barisan Nasional, to buy insurance, if you like. After 2008, the promised riot did not happen. It became completely irrational for the Chinese to vote out of fear. Because it's a paper tiger. Now, to realize that process, it did not happen immediately. It took nearly 3 years by 2011 birthday too, when Ibrahim Ali made that explicit threat and say, my Chinese friends, stay back, I'm the war general, Panglima Perang, you better stay back and stock up your food and so on. He was basically repeating the same lie. And you have thousands of Chinese youth went to the street. That's basically the collapse of the old system. We can't go back now, even if you miss it. We can't go back. The problem with that system is that, the problem with that development is that it actually made the regime much more dependent on the Malay leg. Because you can't fall back on the other leg, right? When you have two legs, you play balancing game. But when that leg is broken, you stand on that. Now, I remember what the point I want to make just now. The statecraft of BN, there are people who think that say, this is the reason why Malaysia remains stable and so on. I say, yes, but you have to really remember this. The objectives of ethnic relation management in Malaysia is to make sure that ethnic tension does not go out of control. Go out of control means the house is on fire, right? But also to make sure that it does not go out of fashion. Because if it goes out of fashion, then the government stands the risk of unemployment. Now, this helps you to understand why corruption is not only a necessary evil for the Malays especially, but overall, why many Malaysians actually accept authoritarianism. Because it's actually more rational to live under an authoritarian regime than live under the threats of private violence. Okay, so come back to this. What happened in 2008 was, after 2008, you have this destructions of the non-Malay leagues for BN, and it was fully confirmed in 2013. Because you have even 2 state seats in Penang, where Barisan Nasional lost their deficit, meaning they can't even get 1 out of 8 votes. And both seats are 90% Chinese. That's clear cut. So what BN did, what UMNO did, was fall back to the Malays' support. And so you have 2 incidents that explain what does it mean. One, the red shirts. when you have Bersih 4, the red shirt was on the street threatening to have a riot in Chinatown. And before that red shirt, you have Perkasa U and all these rowdy protests and so on. And from 2008 to 2013, you have the Cowhead protest, you have the church arson and so on. Similar story. But after 2013, it's much more pronounced. But the other part is actually hudud. The idea of expanding Sharia law, because in the past, if this was held back, there's no reason to hold back. The only thing to hold them back is Sabah and Sarawak. No one cares about the Chinese and the Indian woods in Peninsula. It's gone. If I'm in UMNO position, I'll do the same thing because it's not rational. And the success of the hudud project is, of course, the breakup of Pakatan Rakyat. Okay. So, I need to go on one point about the survival of Barisan Nasional in 2013. Why does it work? One was Malay anxiety, this whole idea that Malays are under threats and so on. And I want to draw this point because a lot of times this Malay anxiety is not always based on objective truth and so on. It's about interpretation. The fact that Chinese was no longer, non-Malays, but especially the Chinese, were no longer fearful of riots and become much more assertive, that itself caused more stress on the Malays. Just look at the examples of the Oktoberfest. Now, the standard line of Oktoberfest against it is not about alcohol, it's bad for your health and so on, but like the bloody Chinese, they get too arrogant now after 2008 that they want to actually put Oktoberfest everywhere in a Muslim country. That's actually the most important, most selling line. What they want to say is that before 2008, there was not an issue. All this thing happened because the Chinese get a bit too arrogant. We were threatened. Yeah. The fact is, Oktoberfest was in Penang since 1973. No one feels threatened, right? The threat is just like how the Buddhist Burmans feel it, the Buddhist Burmans and the Arakans feel it in Arakan. It's not really about what happened out there, it's what you want to feel. So come back to the story. Survival of BN in 2013, one is Malay anxiety. That's why you see that the little swing back to Barisan Nasional. Second is redonation. Now what happened, redonation was 10 years ago, 2003. It was very badly done. How badly done it was, by 2013, those seats won by Barisan Nasional had an average size of 77,655, while those won by Pakatan Rakyat had only 46,510. This is just one aspect of malapportionment. Okay, I finished my first point. Second point is about two coalition politics. First point is about one party state. Second is about two coalition politics. This was an idea initiated by the Chinese communities in 1986. Key people including Dr. Guo Kesun. That's very critical of PhD. What is about these two coalition politics? To put it in a very, very quick way, is basically to say, to replace Barisan Nasional, you need to have a replica of Barisan Nasional, but an improved version. Because if it's too different from the original, people just dare not to put their trust on this. But if it's completely the same, then it makes no point of changing the government, right? So it's a delicate balance of how do you strike between similarities and difference. The key question to that idea is that what is the opposition answer to UMNO? In 1990, when the first time when this idea was put to test, the answer was Semangat 46, led by Tengku Razali. Now, why 46? 1946, the year that UMNO was born. It was a stronger carbon copy than Bersatu today. Okay? You want to feel more irony? Let me tell you. You know what was the slogan then the opposition used against Mahathir? Selamatkan Malaysia. Okay. Now, but Semangat 46 failed because of Tengku Razali wore the wrong hat. And so after 1990, the answer was passed, effectively was passed, because PAT captured Kelantan. So that was passed going back to pre-69 years. It was the oldest Malay opposition party that survived until today. And PAS always sees itself and say, only me can deliver you the Malay right words. That lasted until 2015 when PAS broke with DAP and Pakatan Rakyat collapsed. So of course after 2015 you have Amanah, you have Bersatu's and so on. PAS is what I want to focus on now. I want to focus on this because most people analysis on PAS is either to think that PAS is so corrupt that everything has to do with the 90 or 91 millions, or to think that PAS should have been retained in the opposition at all costs. I want to offer you a different story. There's a fundamental problem with PAS in the opposition coalition. Why? You have to go back to 1981. About 4 months before Mahathir came into power, and this has really got to do with Mahathir, but someone is actually more powerful than Mahathir in a way that his thought shaped this country's future history more than even Mahathir's Vision 2020. That person is Datuk Sri Hadiah Wang. 4 months before Mahathir came into power, he delivered a kuliah in a mosque in Kuala Terengganu, and part of that kuliah was taken out and circulated around the country and known as Amanat Hadi. The Muslims are more familiar with that because they felt the impact of that amanat, which resulted in this practice of takfiri, kafir menkafirkan. So you have two imams, you have two cemeteries and all these stories, and at the end you have the Mumbai tragedy. But there was something much more than that that I think many Malaysians, especially non-Muslim, were not aware of. I'm not, even until today. How do you say this? Kita menentang Barisan Nasional bukan kerana dia lama memerintah kerajaan. We oppose Barisan Nasional not because they were in power for too long. Kita menentang dia kerana dia mengekalkan perlembagaan penjajah, undang-undang kafir dan peraturan jahiliah. We oppose BN because it preserved the colonial constitution, the infidel law, and the pre-Islamic rules. Now, do not expect me to condemn Hadi for being exclusivist and so on. I don't believe in political correctness. I want to say that Hadi was one of the smartest politicians at that time because he carved an ideological space for his party. PAS lost Kelantan after cohabitation with UMNO for nearly about 7 or 8 years in 1977. And under this entire NEP aura, to be a Malay opposition is fundamentally contradicting Malay interests if you buy in the idea of Malay unity. Who threatened the Malays? Non-Malays, right? So that therefore Malays need to be united to basically keep the non-Malays in place so that mereka tahu mana tempat mereka. PAS was cornered to the end. But by taking that line to say that we had to oppose Barisan Nasional because it preserved colonial constitution, infidels law, and pre-Islamic rule, is basically to say the post-colonial states of Malaysia is illegitimate. It was basically a scam. Decolonization did not complete. So the only way to complete it is to restore an imagined pre-colonial order, which is characterized by Muslim dominance and is Sharia-based. Now that vision has different version. The most extensive version is a full-fledged Islamic state. Going down one step, just to impose hudud punishment. Arguing, saying that denying us Muslims, from having hudud punishment, we basically cannot fulfill our rights. I'll finish in 1 minute, sorry. And the next step is that, okay, we may not be able to impose hudud punishment as we want, like stoning and amputation. So what we are calling for is to lift up the Sharia court to be on par with the civil court. As long as Sharia court is below, that means that we are still colonized. Now, if you look at this way, you shouldn't be surprised that Hadi said in last December and say he envisions a political system where the non-Muslim ministers, where only Muslim minister can make this policy, while non-Muslim ministers are only to execute that. It's the same story. So I'm going to keep it very, very short. The problem with that, to pass credit, because every time pass in opposition coalition, pass mellow its position, going down from the extreme to the less extreme. So today pass, compared to them, pass do not talk about Islamic State. Today pass just wants something very, very minimal, to lift the Sharia court to be on par with civil court. And many Muslims feel that the opposition from non-Muslim and from the seculars are completely unreasonable, because you cannot see what we think, that this is just getting back what we need to do, right? Well, past mainstream itself, past actually radicalized Malaysian society. Because in 1981, if you ask Malaysian Muslim and say, would you support to make Sharia the key point? They would say no. Yeah. Most of them would say no. It's a radical, very fringe position. By 2013, when Pew Center in US run across national survey on this issue, whether Sharia law should be made the official law, 86% of Malaysian Muslims say yes. This is how things change. Now, why I'm saying that past exiting, leaving Barisan opposition is something structural, because unless it wins, otherwise this problem will come back. Past built its base by offering a much more radical answer than UMNO to this Malay society. When they get into coalition, it needs to mellow down. But when the prospects of gaining power disappears, past naturally, or the hardliners in past naturally want to move back. So you're going to see this happening. So my last point is that this is why I support Mahathir. For the opposition to work, for the opposition coalition to work, you need a more compatible face of Malay right, the right-wing party. And what Mahathir represents is economic nationalism. What PAS represents is religious nationalism. Now, you can always negotiate with economic nationalists, because at the end of the day, what they look at is material interests. They're rational. I can never win an argument with a religious nationalist, because at some point you will just tell me and say, hey, I'm appointed by God to speak to you here. How do I argue? How do I argue and not committing the crime of blasphemy? Right? So for me, this election is not between Mahathir and Najib. That's a second order story. The first order story is between Mahathir and PAS. And what's the cutting point? 1/3. If PAS win PAS need not to win any seats. All what PAS need to do is to make sure that opposition do not retain 1/3. Because that would mean that PAS prove its claim that it is indispensable in opposition politics. And I seriously do not think any Malay opposition leader can dare to tell PAS and say, you go away. So this election will not resolve much more problems. If you feel uncomfortable with what Wan Faisal said, it's reasonable, but it's not going to go away with these elections. There's a lot of things we need to deal with after election, But what I fear is that we may go down a path where PAS would be able to dictate on the opposition side and on UMNO side, because UMNO, even if it wins, it would have no moral authority on its agenda. And I don't think any of us here will be able to organize something to stop PAS. You have to remember, some people think that PAS position is stupid, but that's because you are not thinking from that, their mentality. From PAS position, Hadi can bring the party down and yet still remain a hero. Because there's a saying, kerja dunia, akhirat rari. If you chase the world, the afterworld will run away from you. Kerja akhirat dunia mari. Chase after the afterworld, the world will come to you. So losing is winning. How do you win? Thank you.
If any one of you suffers any brain short circuit, don't sue us, sue him. He has given us in about 20 minutes a master class on Malaysian political history from